I thought that was gonna fall on me. I was so scared. But hello, everyone. Welcome to Inkwell's investigation. I'm sorry. I'm just so excited for this book. Well, this series. This is technically my second video, but I want to kind of count it as my first because in order to do this series justice, I feel like I have to play by play. I need to narrate. I need to bring you into this world of Lightlark. The author is amazing. The pacing, amazing. The character development, the artwork, to die for. And I highly recommend, please, please read this yourself, listen to it yourself. It is amazing. It is worth the money. It is worth the time. It is worth the dedication. It is amazing. Nevertheless, let's get on into chapter 1 of Lightlark. Isla Crown often fell into puddles of stars, into different places, always without permission. Always seems there was occasions. Even after 5 years, portaling still made her bones groan. She held the device, the star stick, tightly, her breath bottled in her chest like the rare perfumes on her vanity. The glass room spinning and fractioning colors bleeding together until gravity finally pinned her down like a loose thread in the universe. And then it was safely tucked down the back of her neck, along the spine, by the time the door swung open. And all of a sudden, "What happened to your hair?" Poppy shrieked, where Tara came rushing in behind her with the many knives and swords clanking at her waist. Her hair was the least of Isla's worries, though she did not doubt that it was a wreck. Traveling between these realms and new lands with the stick had the habit of making her look disheveled and undoing even the tightly coils and braids that Poppy does. But she doesn't really pretend to be the expert at using this device. At the beginning, the puddle of stars kind of just took her to unexpected places, but the more she used it, she was able to revisit the snow villages of the Moonland lands and the Jubilees of the Skyland Newlands and a few other lands that haven't quite been settled by any of the 6 realms. Little by little, Isla kind of learned more, but that was kind of the extent. She really didn't master any more than that. All she really knew was somehow the mysterious device allowed her to travel hundreds of miles in silence. Jealous. Tara kind of sighed, and her hand dropped to the side from the hilt of her blade, and was looking at Poppy and said it was just a few strands. Poppy, of course, ignored Tara and rushed over to Isla and started fixing her hair with a brush and leaf oil as quickly and as just precise as same preciseness that her fighting teacher used as Poppy uses. Isla couldn't help but to cry out as Poppy just removed these pins. Poppy shook her head and kind of looked at Isla, saying she had to start all over from scratch. She stuck the clips in between her lips and spoke around them. "I leave you alone for an hour, and you're a mess. Even locked the door for good measure. How in the realm did you manage to mess it up in your own room, little bird?" Her own room. Isla's room was not her own. It was an orb of glass, remnants of an ancient greenhouse. Panes were painted, though. The windows had been sealed. Not barred, but sealed. All but one door had been removed. She was literally a little bird, just like Poppy, and every now and then Tara would call her. She was a bird in a cage. Isla kind of shrugged. Just some swordplay, she said sweetly. Poppy and Tara were basically her only family, even though they weren't family. They did not share blood. Everyone who did share blood with her was long dead. But still, even them did not know about her star stick and portaling. If they did, they would definitely take it away and never let her use it. It was the only, basically, key out of her cage. And she's been locked inside this cage, not just for her safety, but for everyone else's. Tara eyed Isla suspiciously and kind of looked at the wall, and on the wall there were dozens of swords that hung there, kind of making a mirror. Pity you can't take any of these. As she looks at Isla, and her fingers kind of just played with the blades. She is given Isla every single sword presented from the castle of the ancient store. Isla earned them after each training achievement mastered. Poppy kind of scoffed. That's one rule, Centennial rule I agree with. We don't need her reaffirming all the other realms' whole views of us. Nerves kind of swelled in her Isla's stomach, leaves kind of dancing. She kind of forced a smile, knowing that it would kind of chill Poppy out a little bit. Poppy always was telling Isla that she didn't smile enough. Isla haven't met many people, but the one she has, pretty simple. She just needed to uncover the motivation, what they wanted most. Everyone wanted something, and some things were pretty easy to give. A smile for a charm teacher who spent nearly 2 decades teaching her student manners. A compliment for a woman who complimented beauty above all else. Poppy, pretty as you are, all the other realms, whole views are true. We are monsters. Poppy sighed, put the last pin in Isla's hair. Not you, she said meaningfully to Isla. And although Isla's guardian's words were meant in love and good, she kind of made her stomach full with dread. "They're ready," Tara said to Poppy. She took a few steps towards the vanity. Isla kind of watched them through the mirror, their edges very spotted and decrepit with age. They looked over at her and asked if she was ready. And Isla thought to herself, no, she never would be. The Centennial was many things. A game, a chance at breaking the many curses that plague these realms, the 6 of them. An opportunity to win unmatched power, a meeting of the 6 rulers. 100 days on an island, cursed, only to appear once every 100 years. And for Isla, her death. Are you ready, Isla? Voice in her mind said mocking and cruel. Her fear was only tempered by her curiosity. She always longed for more. Everything. More experiences, more places, more people. The place she was going, Lightlark, was made of more. Everything she wanted. Before her guardians had discovered it and had it sealed, Isla used to sneak out through this loose pane of glass down through the forest. And there she met this elder's lady. She once lived on Lightlark, kind of how all of them used to before the curses. All realms would take basically different lands and create other lands after the aftermath of the curses. Her stories were like fruits to Isla, sweet but limited. She spoke of kings that could grip the sun in their hands, white-haired women that could make the sea dance, castles in clouds, flowers that bloomed pure power. That was before the curses. Now, the island was basically a shadow of itself, trapped in this forever storm that made traveling to it outside the Centennial impossible. Even by boat or enchantment, no way. One night, Isla found the eldest lady at the base of the tree. She might have thought the woman was sleeping if it was not for her tan skin that became bark and her veins became vines. Wildlings wielded nature in life and joined it in death, but there was nothing natural about this death. Even at over 500, even away from the strength of Lightheart, she died too soon. Her death, and the first of many, was Isla's fault. Tara repeated her question, looking at Isla, her dark green eyes the same color as the leaves and ivy, kind of the skin over everything. The exact same color as Isla's. Are you ready? She repeats. Isla nods, though she was shaking, and her hands trembled as she reached for the crown. It was a simple gold band door with these little leaves and buds and a little snake. She placed it on the top of her head and was very careful not to mess up the clips that Poppy put in that kept the hair out of her face. Beautiful, Poppy said. Isla didn't need to hear the compliment to know it's true. Beauty was a wildling's gift. And curse. The curse that gotten her own mother killed. Which only made the fact that she supposedly had her mother's face all the more unsettling. Poppy met Isla's eyes through the mirror. You are enough, little bird. Better than any of them. If only that was true, Isla thought. Isla could feel panic breaking her features in half. What if this was the last time she ever saw her guardians? What if she never returned? What if she never came back to this room? Her hands acted on instinct, reaching for both her guardians, wanting more, wanting to touch them, wanting to embrace them one last time. Before she could, Tara glared at her that made eyes look of steel. Being sentinel is selfish to Tara. The Centennial was not about Isla. It was about saving her people, saving her well. Chast-eyed, Isla straightened up. She stood slowly, heaviness on her crown far greater than its weight. I know what I must do, she said. Each ruler arrived at the Centennial with a plan. Tara and Poppy had hammered the plan into Isla's since she was a child, which is a little weird when she learned the plan. And Isla said that she would follow the orders. Good, Tara said, because you are only hope. And with that, the Wildling Castle was more inside than in. The halls were kind of like bridges, trees extended like arms extending to the corridor, branches gently kissing and touching on her dress as if they were saying goodbye. Leaves would rustle by Ursula's sides as she walked through the endless chambers that she was not allowed access to. Her caretakers walking behind her. Vines and birds come in and out as they pleased. Wind howled through the walls and through the tunnels that made her cape barrel behind her. She wore deep green to honor her realm, a fabric that pooled at her feet. Her cape was made of gossamer, sheer enough to make its traditional purpose remedious obsolete, and that choice represented her realm just as much as its color. Wildlings were very proud of their body, beauty, and fidelity. They have always loved wildly, lived freely, and fought fiercely. 500 years before each of the six realms, wildling, starling, moonling, skyling, sunling, and nightshade, cursed. Their strengths turned into, well, their own poisons. Each curse uniquely wicked. Wildlings was twofold. They were cursed to kill anyone they fell in love with, and to live exclusively eating human hearts. And they turned kinda into these terrifying, beautiful monsters with these wicked powers to seduce. With this single look, thousands of wildlings and men and women have been killed off because of it. Love became forbidden and reckless, and fewer children were born because of it. And daughters had always been more common for this realm. Though love has various forms, men were killed more often when the rules were broken, and they slowly became a small community of mostly royal women, feared, hated, weak, since fewer people meant less power. The Centennial was the only chance to end everyone's curse, to return to what they once were, to regain the power they so badly needed. Isla was the only chance that her realm had. "You are our only hope," echoed in her head. She kept hearing it. She heard these chanting noises before she first saw them, clashing blades like instruments. While in control was on nature, on full display. Flowers bloomed over the balcony, into the hall and not stopping until they touched Isla's feet. They grew, doubling over themselves in a puddle of petals and rising to Isla's ankles. According to lore, 1,000 years before, wildlings were able to grow an entire forest, which is half a thought, move mountains with the flick of the wrist. Now, hundreds of years after the curse, and just as much away from the island, not so much. The village kind of dwindled, kind of barely more than party tricks. Isla walked carefully towards the flowers until the castle walls ended and she faced hundreds of cheering wildlings. The trees above bloomed cherries and berries and blood-red blossoms, which fell onto the crowd. It's kind of like a colorful rain. Animals came into the room, sitting beside each companion. Wildlings power was varied within the master of nature, which often included affinity with animals. Terra had a panther named Shadow, as easy as she communicated with Isla. Poppy had a hummingbird, which is fitting, that liked to nestle in her hair, and Isla nodded. The crowd became silent. It is my honor to represent all round the centennial. Isla's pulse quickened, a drum along her bones. Looking across the crowd with stunning and hopeful faces, some wildlings wore dresses made from bits of fabric woven through leaves and vines. Some wore nothing except for, of course, swords, dumb bags, the essentials. Some clearly just fed, the lips just stained red. Isla kind of looked and tried the best not to trip, not to look weak, not to trip, not to stumble, not to question why the ruler just kind of hid and never came out, and why attendants were banned, and why they were taking orders through Poppy and Tara, and kind of tried not to wonder why or what's going on with everyone else. She was trying to just remember the plan. But in the moment, she made a promise because that was what her people were looking for: reinsurance, strength. I vow to shatter our curse once and for all. They would have every right to doubt and be worried. Isla's failure would doom them for at least another century, which they probably will not survive. And there's already been 4 failed ones before Isla. Isla kind of clenched her teeth, waiting for everyone to see through her, waiting for someone to call her out. But the morning air ignited with blades raising high overhead, birds screeching from the treetops, wind rustling, leaves roar. Relieved, Isla walked down the stairs, smeared in petals, nature blossoming at her feet as the crowd just parted, making a path towards her most ancient twin trees. The roots crusted into the air and then braided together, forming this towering archway, round as a looking glass. The other side of the forest waited behind, safe and familiar. But that was not where she was going. Isa swallowed. She has been prepared. She was preparing for this very moment her entire life. Tara's hands and Poppy's hands found her shoulders, one each, as Isla walked through the portal that worked only once every 100 years. Her last words to her guardians fresh in her mind. I will follow your orders, and wished they wouldn't lie. Chapter 2. The Island. The portal rippled, closed, choking her tears into silence. Only Isla's ragging breath remained. She took one step forward, and light like 1,000 dying suns and stars blinded her, an arm reaching out to steady her. Open your eyes, a voice said, dark and striking as midnight. Isla hadn't even realized they were closed. With a blink, The world stumbled and then steadied, this portaling far worse than using her star stick. This face belonged to a man that was bemused and familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. He was so tall that Isla had to tilt to meet his eyes. His hair spilled ink across his pale forehead. Of course he was Nightshade, which meant, "Thank you, Grimshaw," Isla said. And she quickly straightened and looked around, and she hoped no one had seen her stumble. She could practically hear Poppy and Tara in her ears scolding her. But besides Isla and the Nightshade, the cliff was empty. She kind of turned, and a tiny choking sound rasped against her voice. The sea raged angrily hundreds of feet below. She almost joined the jutting rocks, almost died, almost ended the plan before the centennial even started, and ended all of her plans. That would have been inconvenient. The Nightshade ruler grinned, revealing a single dimple, completely out of place in his very coolly cut face. "Call me Grim, Isla." Grim? What a terrible world, Isla thought, warm with pride. But still, the name suited him. There was something very grim beneath his grin, and a faint shadow that might become monstrous in the dark. "Have we met before?" It wasn't that Grim knew her name. It wasn't expected. It wasn't even that he pronounced it perfectly, like a snake's hiss. All the letters sounded out. There was something else that Grin faltered. "If we had." His eyes dipped. "It wouldn't have been just once." Isla could feel her face get hot. Other than rare, closely monitored interactions or her secret travels to the new lands with the Star Stick, she hadn't really spent much time with men, especially men that looked like him. Especially men who didn't seem to be terrified of her and her wiling curse. She frowned. He should be afraid. If a wildling wished, she could make a person fall off a cliff in pursuit of them. The power to beguile was impossible to resist, though forbidden during the 100 Days. The Nightshade probably thought he was safe. He was not, Isla thought. Each centennial was a giant game, a chance to gain on-peril ability. It was said that whoever broke the curses by fulfilling the prophecy would be gifted all the power it took to spin them. The ultimate prize, of course. What's is flirting meant to distract her? She kind of thought, and glared at him. And Grim just grinned at her even wider. Interesting, she thought. Every 100 years since the curses have been cast, the island of Lightlark appeared for just 100 days, freed from its impossible storm. Rulers of each realms were invited from the new lands after, they settled from the new lands. They tried to break these curses, binded by each of the powers. every realm except for Nightshade. Nightshades had the power to spin curses, making them prime suspects of the ones who created these curses. Even though Grimm denies it, he says he did not. This year, it seems though the Lightlark King was desperate. And that's because this was the first centennial Nightshade was invited to. Grimm took her once more before she could eject. Isla moved to the side, and a moment later, a giant marking, an insignia that represented all six realms, glowed gold. And someone else kind of just appeared right where Isla was. A pale blue cloak, cracked with wind, before settling with bare, very dark shoulders and muscled arms. The man had eyebrows larger than his eyes, sculpted chin, and a perfectly coiffed stubble that framed his pink mouth. Azul, ruler of Skyling. Isla has known their names since the time she could talk. Azul and Grimm were both ancient, more than 500 years old, alive the day the curses had been cast. They were legends. Compared to them, she was no one. Centuries were apparently not enough time for Azul and Grimm to become friends. The Skyling kind of nodded at the Nightshade, and Grimm kind of gave him a wicked smile. Azul turned to Isla and bowed fully, reaching for her hand. Nice to have new wilding blood this centennial, he said. His bright eyes met hers, then studied her fingers, each covered with rings with gems as big as acorns. Though the rest of the realms liked to view wildlings as salvages, the wealth was unquestionable. Controllers of nature had the advantages. Clouds. I've never seen a diamond that big. To Isla, it was just a rock. Pretty, but nothing in Spain ever seemed very special, too special. Jewels was made when great power was wielded, and over the centuries, the glittery gems that bloomed beneath the ground in the wildling newland, rising and eventually blossoming like flowers. It was difficult not to trip over them, or some kind of precious stone in her lands, which she only knew from texts and not certainly from personal experience. As Tara and Poppy knows, Tara always said these glittering rocks was the reason they had such a steady supply of hearts. Thieves from other realms, foolish, bold, wicked, would sneak onto the territories to get the diamonds, and they would pounce. Isla smiled. So, the Skyling liked jewels. She took off her ring and placed it onto his longest finger without missing a single beat. "It compliments you much more than it does me." Azul looked like he might object, but he didn't. Someone else then appeared, stepping very easily past them, as if walking through portals was as seamless as the tide coming in. She looked and turned to Isla, her frown seemingly come as easily as most people's smiles. "So, this is the new pet." An ember lit in Isla's chest. The rest of the realms viewed the women warriors as savage temperatures that lured lovers, and feasted on hearts. And Isla really couldn't blame them, because that was pretty much the truth. But wildlings were so much more than that. At least they had been at a certain point, and still could be, just like all of the other realms. Even though part of her wanted to say something that she would regret, she knew the ruler wanted. The ruler was goading her, trying to get her to show the monster, show the rest of them that she was nothing more than a bloodthirsty beast. Instead, Isla bowed. "An honor to meet you, Cleo," nodding her head in slight reverence. Cleo was the oldest amongst everyone, even older than the king of Lightlark, who also ruled over all sunlings. Her age was at odds with her perfectly smooth face and skin. Though most rulers were hundreds of years older, it was almost you couldn't tell the difference between them and Isla. Almost. Instead of making another insult, Cleo kinda simply raised her chin at Isla and sneered, looking at Isla's green dress as though she basically came on the island naked. Compared to the moonling's clothing, she might as well have. Cleo's white gown had long sleeves like milky beams of moonlight, the neckline that reached her chin, and a cape that completely covered 3/4 of her body. The skin, Isla could see, was so fair her veins shined through. Blue streaks on a slab of white marble. She was not only many shades lighter than Isla, but far taller. Her face was long and well pointed in 3 places, sculpted like a diamond. The insignia glowed, and a girl stepped forward, stumbling very slightly. She was the silver stars. From her long, straight sheet of hair, from her twinkling stairs to dress to her gloves that reached her elbows. She kind of smiled sheepishly at them, her heart-shaped face going wide, and then stood tall. "I suppose I'm the last to arrive?" Cleo channeled her distaste right at the goal. The ruler of Starling, like Isla, was new. Starling's curse was one of the cruelest. No one in the realm lived past the realm of 25 at all. Isla stepped forward and offered her hand. "Celeste, it is?" The Starling kind of smiled warmly at Isla. "Hello, Isla." "Enchanted," Grim said, offering a bow that seemed to mock Azul. The Skyling kind of frowned just a moment and then offered Celeste his own fingers, now glimmering with Isla's diamond. "More new blood. I have a good feeling about this, Centennial." Cleo raised an eyebrow at him. "She better hope so," she said, nodding at Celeste. "She won't be here for the next one." The Starling's face kind of went sad, and the Moonling just simply turned around, a white cape floating behind her. "Don't feel too special," Azul said with exhaustion. "She's this unpleasant to everyone." The wolves began the path to the palace, and Isla's heart tripped in anticipation. She was so focused on them, she hadn't gotten a chance to take in her surroundings. The rest of the century, the island was encased in a storm, but now the clouds had cleared. Lightlark was a shiny, cliffy thing. Its bluffs were white as bone, and sunlight rained down sheets of misted gold. One of the original sources of power, its ground still thrummed with it, singing to Isla, like a humming siren song. She could feel its force with every step, every breath. She drank the island in very greedily, like the wine she was never allowed to have, equally addictive and dangerous. Poppy's lessons ran through her head, facts on paper, now real and solid before her. Thousands of years before her, the island was cut into several pieces so that each realm could claim a shard. Nightshade left the island to form their own land. Wildlings left after the curses. The pieces that remained were Star Island for the Starlings, Sky Island for the Skylings, Moon Island for the Moon Islands, and Sun Island for the Sunlings. So confusing. And then there's the main realm where like everyone gathered together, and it was kind of the Centennial's base. And it was known that Lightheart royalty lived there. The mainland castle loomed there nearby, kind of like a crown jewel jutting precariously over the sea. Large enough to kind of be its own city, which was good, considering its main inhabitant could not leave it, not during the day at least. Isla must have been staring at it, because Celeste sighed. Do you think he's watching us? She said quietly. He, the Sunling ruler and king of Lightheart, the last remaining origin, with blood from each of the four realms that still had a presence on the island. He could wield each of the four Lightheart powers. And, in all accounts, he was insufferable. Unlike Light and beyond, love had a price. Falling deeply and truly in love and forming a bond gave a beloved complete access. They could do whatever they wanted. They could wield it, reject it, take it, destroy it, knowing very well how many people would want access to his power. He kind of just didn't trust anyone and was very paranoid and cold and unkind, and Isla very much dreaded meeting him, especially given the first step of Poppy's and Tara's step was seducing him. She kind of resisted the urge to flinch, and instead she kind of breathed through her mask of charm, made obscene gesture, and the game has officially started. Isla kind of looked and said, I hope so, as crowds waited for them at the castle's doors. Starlings, moonlings, skylings. On the night of the curses 500 years before, all six rulers perished. The power and responsibilities were transferred to the heirs, and all of them, except for the new king, fled the islands indistinguishably to create these new lands hundreds of miles from each other. Some people did remain on Earth, but once Isla did ask the Wildling Elders why anyone would stay near constant curse templates, she kind of just looked at Isla and was like, Power is in the island's blood and bones, she said. Like hearts lengthens our lives, gives us access to a power much greater than our own. And more than that, to many, like hearts is our own. No whiling remained. She would get no aid from people here. She was alone, truly. Don't worry, a deep voice kind of said mockingly. I don't have any adoring fans either. The crowd kind of looked at Grim with a very good mix of fear and disdain, and Isla kind of studied the reactions. And Grim kind of just looked like night that came to life. His clothing shattered, spun to silk. If violence were looked down upon on Lightlark, nightshades seemed to be outright hated. And according to Tara and Poppy's lessons, never fully accepted on the island. They had their own land, a stronghold that they had maintained for thousands of years. The war between Nightshade and Lightheart hadn't helped. Isla didn't meet his gaze, though she very much felt his eyes all over her. It was unnerving. Her skin felt electric. I'm sure you'll find or get enough attention back home. She kind of smiled at him and smiled at the crowd, kind of testing the reaction to her. Some kind of smiled, a little unsure. Others recoiled. The hurt devoured temptress, people would think and say. She wasn't surprised. Everything she represented was forbidden. The mooning woman covered her child's eyes and made a figure in the air, basically warding off a demon. You know, I do, he admitted to Isla. Well, yet I'm left unsatisfied. Isla ignored him. She wasn't going to play his game, so this game, whatever it was, she had her own game to play. The interior of the castle looked like a sun had burst inside and bathed the walls. An ode to the sunlings who had built them. Everything was gold. Buttering sunlight spilled in, covering the forward in glittering light. It reflected the shininess of the floor. I still kind of sprinted as she was still outside. There was a raging fire that burned in a ring above them, flames peaking in different places where crystals are. The Sun's ruler was not there, though. He couldn't be. Even if he did want to, which Isla truly doubted he wanted to, Sunlings were cursed to never feel the warmth of sunlight or feel or anything of day. Forced to shun what gave them power, the essence of the power. The king of light was now trapped in the shades and darkness of his chamber, was only able to come out at night. And that, I suppose, they were similar. I spent a lot of time trapped inside too. A woman installing silver bowed before them. Behind them, a small group of staff echoed her movement. Each ruler kind of received an attendant for the whole centennial. It would be our pleasure to escort you to your chambers, they said to Isla. Each ruler kind of led away each end of the castle far away from each other. It was very intentional. Every detail was intentional. Tara taught her and drilled into her, but as the young stalling girl kind of walked towards her slowly, the way a child might approach like a coiled snake. "My lady," she said, voice very soft. Isla had to lean in, which kind of just made the girl flinch. Isla resist the urge to roll her eyes and thought to herself, did the girl really think that she was just gonna feast on her, like, right now, right here? But kind of was wild, but they weren't, like, that wild. "Follow me," the girl said to Isla. "Isla," she said to the girl as the girl stiffed back, waist away. Isla would most likely need the girl's help during some point, which meant she would need to earn the loyalty of this girl. "You can call me Isla." "As you wish," the girl kind of like mumbled under her breath. She led Isla up like a big step of stairs that ran down the center of the castle, that ran down an impossible tangle of hallways that jutted over each other and across each other like bridges. Kind of unlike her palace, this became more and more and more enclosed the deeper she went. Kind of reminded her of a maze in a cave or a prison. She kind of imagined the king as an ancient beast trapped in the dark, lost in the labyrinth that once was his castle. They reached a stretch without a single window. The walls grew colder, the walls thicker. The lady stopped in front of an ancient stone door, and all of the strength the little girl could muster, she pushed the door open. Someone, somehow, planted an oak tree in the middle of the room with fruit that Isla had no clue. Its roots dug into the stone floor somehow. Ivy kind of crept across the ceiling in a pretty design leading to a wall her bed rested against, which was covered with leaves down to the floor. There was more. Isaac walked across the room and onto a wide coaling factory that jutted right out over the sea, dangerously so. Waves turned below. The castle was a curious child perched at the top of the mountain, leaning way too far over the edge. Isa frowned. "How sturdy is this?" It seemed like the balcony would break at any moment, or that the castle itself would simply slide off the cliff. "As sturdy as the king itself, I suppose?" Right, Isla knew that from her lessons. The king of Lightheart didn't just control its power, but he was its power. If something happened to him, the entire land would crumble away, and every Lightlark land and realm would fall. And that's why he was so careful, and not in fear of being killed, but in fear of someone stealing his terrible power and him losing everything. Another similar to Isla. She could not fall in love. Well, she could, but everyone lived in fear of a wildling loving them. The curse made love a death sentence. Not exactly the fodder for romance on either side. It wasn't an issue so far in Isla's relatively short life, but how cruel would a king be who was afraid to fall in love for more than 500 years? Seems she might soon find out. And with that, you will find out in the next episode too, because I am leaving us at the end of chapter 2. I appreciate you sitting down and stumbling through this with me and listening to this book. It is amazing. I love this book so much, and I'm so excited to keep on finishing these. And please be patient with me as I post. I am no pro. I am a human being like all of you with a very busy life and a very busy work schedule and procrastinates more than I really should. But I'm excited to dive more into this with you guys. So with that, have a lovely night, and I will see you next time in the inkwell.